Okay.
It's like automatically, do I have to put a password? Is that right? Because I don't play golf, I wouldn't know that. You gonna get some food? Oh, you okay? Are you okay? So I have to say, yes, I promise to be good. Oh, we must have used more than in the bottle before we put the issue.
Oh, no, I was just looking at nameplates and checking who wasn't here yet.
Where's your board at? I can't see what's happening.
Well, that was good.
Who's running this?
And here's the post over. Their caucus is on the May 21st. They're not doing it right. May 21st.
Chairman Avery, it is 7 o'clock and we have a forum, so we can start anytime you're ready.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Let's go. Good evening, everyone. Want to welcome everybody to our Prtc Commissioners meeting. So the meeting is now open. Okay, so the meeting is being streamed live streaming Prtc YouTube channel. And this information was provided on the Prtc's website, Facebook page, and the Transit Center, as well as being advertised in Inside Nova and the Freelance Star. We have one action item that we need to go over tonight. Commissioner Frazier has asked to participate in this meeting remotely via conference call. And so with that, we're going to have to go through a procedural process. Commissioner Frazier, would you please state your remote location and the reason for your remote participation?
Thank you, Supervisor Ingrid. I was in a car accident and I have a broken foot, a broken finger, a hurt shoulder, and I am still in my booth. Hopefully that will be ending soon. I am at my house, 11203, the Palladium Way, Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I appreciate the consideration to let me participate remotely.
Yes, well, first, Commissioner Frazier, we are happy that you're okay. Okay, and that takes a tough person to still want to make this meeting when you clearly should be recovering. So at this time, I need a motion.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
so it's been motioned by Supervisor Commissioner Bailey, seconded by Commissioner Sebesky. All right, so is any discussion? No discussion? All right, let me call for the roll. Yeah, excuse me.
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Andrea Bailey.
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin.
Aye.
Jesse Vega.
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy.
Aye.
Monica Gary.
Aye.
Pamela Sebesky.
Aye.
Jeanette Richel.
Yes.
Matthew Kelly.
Aye.
Deborah Frazier.
I,
Lori Hayes.
Aye.
Todd Horsley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that resolution is approved.
All right. At this time, we'll stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get into the roll, I just want to welcome Commissioners Karen Mills, Commissioner Lori Hayes, and actually Monica Gray was here last meeting, but just want to welcome all our new commissioners to the PRTC. So welcome everyone. And at this time, we will get into the roll call. So Christina, if you can call the roll, please.
Victor Angry.
Here.
Andrea Bailey.
Present.
Kenny Bodie.
Present.
Margaret Franklin.
Present.
Janine Lawson. Wesley Vega.
Here.
Pete Canlon. Maggie Hansford. Kalai Kandasamy.
Here.
Karen Mills. Kim Short. Ann Wheeler. Tanisha Allen. Monica Gary. Meg Bumpy. Pamela Young. Pamela Sebesky.
Here.
Ralph Smith.
Here.
Jeanette Richel.
Here.
Preston Banks. Alana Mensing. Daryl Moore. Matthew Kelly.
Here.
Jason Graham. Deborah Frazier.
here,
Lori Hayes.
Here.
Tim McLaughlin. David Ross. Jennifer Mitchell. Jennifer DeGrule. Todd Horsley.
Here.
George Barker.
All
Mr.
right.
Chair, we do have a form.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All right, it's been motioned by Commissioner Bodie, seconded by Commissioner Bailey. Any discussion, well, excuse me, not discussion, any changes or anything to the agenda? No change at this time. Okay, can I get a roll? Call for the vote.
Victor Angry.
Aye.
Andrea Bailey.
Aye.
Kenny Bodie.
Aye.
Margaret Franklin.
Aye.
Wesley Vega. Kalai Kandasamy.
Aye.
Monica Gary. Pamela Sebesky.
Aye.
Jeanette Richel.
Yes.
Matthew Kelly.
Yes.
Deborah Frazier.
yes,
Lori Hayes.
Aye.
Todd Horsley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion is approved.
Thank you, ma'am. And now can I get a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Vice Chair Richel and seconded by Commissioner Franklin, more from this Commissioner Turtle. Any discussion? Okay, can I get the roll, please? Call for the vote.
Victor Angry.
Aye.
Andrea Bailey.
Aye.
Kenny Bodie.
Aye.
Margaret Franklin.
Aye.
Wesley Vega. Kalai Kandasamy.
Aye.
Monica Gary. Pamela Sebesky.
Aye.
Jeanette Richel.
Yes.
Matthew Kelly.
Yes.
Deborah Frazier.
I,
Lori Hayes.
I, will abstain, I guess. I wasn't here last time.
And Todd Horsley. Mr. Chairman, that motion is approved.
Thank you, ma'am. And now we'll have a presentation by VRE Mr. Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, commission members and others. We do have the CEO report from both January and February. I believe in your packet, there's some information items in there. I believe from both time periods and some other information. So let me just kind of give you a brief overview. Just wanted to state that VRE currently continues to operate our normal service level. As you know, in January, I think just like other transit providers, we did struggle a little bit, particularly with winter weather. And we did have to reduce our service level on a couple of days to what we refer to as our S schedule. And in some cases, we actually had to suspend service. So ridership, of course, was down considerably in the month of January. But our reliability as measured with on-time performance was 92%. In February, ridership did rebound again, not quite to levels that we saw in the pre-holiday period, but did rebound, and our on-time performance was 95%. I wanted to also state that we continue to monitor the projections for the return to work, and I know there's been a lot of conversation, at least externally in the press, particularly in the last week. So moving forward, of course, we do work with federal agency and private employer reps. And I will have to say that some of the information that we were tracking, let's just say it goes back a couple of months, maybe even a month or so ago, that's changing a little bit. So, and changing for the good as it relates to, public transit. So we continue to engage those representatives and just to kind of help us see what at least the near term is. But we do anticipate a surge of federal agency and other employers to come back starting as early as the end of this month, and that surge would likely continue over about a 6-week period into May, and then of course beyond. So, and just for an example, we had previously anticipated a pickup in ridership even as soon as this past week, and we have seen that. Our ridership, if I look at from a day-to-day comparison from say this past Tuesday to the previous Tuesday, we had picked up probably almost 600 riders on each of those days. So we're getting again slowly, but I think the next couple of months is really going to be telling. So with that, we continue to maintain a continuity of operations, and with all of our business functions continue to operate effectively as we are currently still in a pandemic. So that is my report, Mr. Chair.
All right. Do you have any questions, comments? All right. Meeting you, John, this evening. Thank you, Mr. Officer. Okay. So we don't have any in-person public comment time. Do we have any public comment time online or
Mr. Chairman, no comments were submitted prior to our deadline.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Item 8, consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve consent agenda items 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, and 8.6?
So move back for Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes.
I'm going to abstain from the entire consent agenda with one item. I would need to pull.
Okay. All right. Can we call for the vote? Call for the vote.
Victor Angry.
Aye.
Andrew Bailey.
Aye.
Kenny Bobby.
Aye.
Margaret Franklin.
Aye.
Justin Vega. Aye. Kawhi Kondesani. Monica Gary. Pamela Sadowski.
Aye.
Jeanette Mitchell.
Yes.
Matthew Kelly.
Yes.
Deborah Frazier. Aye. Lori Hayes.
Aye.
Todd Horsley.
Abstain.
Mr. Chairman, that motion is approved.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, this is Dr. Snyder. Floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Follow from previous meetings, although we don't have a formal follow-up, I do want to offer an update on several things from the General Assembly. So as you know, things do change quickly. So this was my most current status for a few items I have to consider. The key items I want to point out, there are vast differences between the proposed budgets from the two chambers overall, especially in regard to the revenues available for spending, which of course impacts both the scale as well as the priorities for spending across the Commonwealth. So that's what we're watching there are two tax bills driving the available revenues that will have a direct impact on transportation. And neither budget actually reflects any spending impact in the transportation agency. So there's bills to reduce the revenues, but not bills to reduce the spending. And the reason why is because right now the sales tax, simply put, you've heard the state say they're awash in cash as a result of some of that. So first, the grocery tax. I want to point out the Northam introduced budget proposed eliminating the remaining 1.5% of state sales tax and use tax on food effective January 1st, 2023. And because that is mid-cycle, we wouldn't see as much loss in the first year. But then with the loss of an additional, the portion that affects us is transportation, which is 0.5%. That's a net impact of about 1.86 million. And that's not transit, that's all transportation. That's roadways, etc. The Senate has agreed with the Northam proposal, but they've also added an exemption for personal hygiene products that increases that to about another $2.2 million in terms of transportation tax revenue. So a net impact of about 188.3 million, and no indicator to backfill that, which is an area of concern that we'll continue to watch. And to point out, neither the Northam budget nor any proposed budgets from the House or the Senate have a measure to replace that funds missing. It's just, we're okay for a year or two, we'll figure it out later, is the general consensus in Richmond. The suspension of the gasoline tax, which was something we talked extensively about by Governor Youngkin, that was proposed to reduce the motor fuels tax, both gasoline and diesel, by 5 cents per gallon over 12 months. This was not assumed in the introduced budget, so it requires a reduction of about $378 million in revenue from the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, which of course then gets dispersed by CTV. The House bill that's active right now has approved legislation in the budget. However, the Senate did not adopt this proposal. One thing now included, however, is there's the new 23-24 budget has the $58 million in outside the beltway concessionaire payments for I-66. So that is new money moving in, but again, it's not tied to large-scale transportation projects. It is, those concessionaire payments are tied to other projects that must be directed. So the other thing that affects us directly is there's the Transit Ridership Incentive Program, which was introduced and passed 2 years ago, the baby of Senator Barker, to help us recover some funds that we had lost in DRPT's merit program. It's focusing on regional routes, and this is $5 million have been proposed to be added to that, which is very beneficial to us, especially since the I-66 and the toll revenues programs like that, that's focused on peak throughput. They have to benefit the toll payer. This allows us to offer services up toward Dulles and get north-south, or if we want to operate into Fairfax. Different things like that that allows us to provide regional routes, gives us a new funding stream. But it has to be for that regional transportation. It's not for localized services unless it can be demonstrated that it does have that regional impact, but it is for commuter services. So the primary concern for us where it sits right now is the loss of the long-term revenues from the loss of the grocery tax. If that passes, and it seems it will, it's something that is universally supported, but the current surplus and sales tax from the spendemic is really what's going to buoy the systems over the next couple of years. So that's something to be watching. NVTC has issued a letter, and the chair authored a letter in regards to just encouraging the General Assembly to find a chair of VRE, authored that, former chair of us, of course. And so it's a question. One thing I do want to possibly see some guidance on is whether or not, we want to author a similar letter just to say, hey, this is an area of concern. Just wanted to get a temperature check on that. Any guidance and direction?
Yeah, in the letter from VRE, it didn't necessarily highlight any particular bill. It just expressed the need for a long-term solution. And so we did that to make it more palatable for those that perhaps want to support the administration, but also understand the importance of maintaining transportation funding. So that's kind of the first thing to put out. But I did have a question about the 378 million from the Commonwealth Transportation. Like you said, we're not as concerned about that as much as we are about the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. I just wanted to a little more clarity.
Well, that's the gas tax aspect of it very concerned because it'll just take money from everything, but that seems to have the least likelihood of viability. The real issue would be, and that's only for a 12-month reduction that would likely then return. So it wouldn't have a long-term impact. There is no replacement for the grocery tax at all.
Right.
So that's the dilemma we face there.
Yes.
Would it be a little bit better to, whenever we start using concern and stuff like that, I feel like we're, hey, please help. Wouldn't it be a little bit more appropriate to spot out, say, as of right now, you're reducing these funds, you're not reducing the services, so we would like an explanation on how you're going to maintain that levels and ask for a specific ask as opposed to we're concerned, you're cutting it, you're not reducing any of the services in the departments. Can you please explain to us how you're going to cover the shortfall? And just make it a blanket question for an answer as opposed to just expressing concern. And that way, however you feel, you get an answer. You should expect an answer. I'd rather have something come back to us rather than just say, hey, we're concerned.
Yeah, this is about a lottery ticket, right? Yeah, so if we can get some.
Can we see this letter before it gets sent out?
Yeah. All right, so, yes.
Okay. Audience being Secretary of Transportation, would that be your GRPT? Both?
I think both, yeah. Copy your documents.
Okay, we'll work on that over the coming weeks. And again, there's no resolution for it in this session, right? There's not something that can be done to address this. It's a known concern. It's been expressed by every transit system in the state. It's been expressed as a concern by counties. It's been expressed as a concern by road builders. So it's that universal. We understand that you're flush with cash for the near term. Understand that, but that's not a forever thing. So what is going to keep the funding mechanisms alive beyond? So, okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. And at the same time, I think it's equally important for us to start looking at the possibility of this actually going through. We still see, based on the reports, that ridership is not to levels where it should be. And so if we're talking about not reducing services, perhaps that's an action that needs to be taken by us. If we still have empty buses, routes that are not being utilized, that's an action that we have to take.
To hold to the discussion. Okay. Any more discussion?
And then service and ridership update. Ridership has remained pandemic predictable, meaning as the pandemic wanes, ridership goes up. As it returns, ridership goes down. So as you can imagine, January and February numbers reflecting both the snowy weather and the Omicron variant. We have, however, seen our biggest increases in the midweek trips. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That seems to be the predictive pattern. And our focus is maintaining consistent services and encouraging the ridership return, which is happening for us faster than any other commuter service in the region. We are, if you do apples to apples comparison, we're 40% recovered on our commuter services, 70%, 75% on our local. Now, to point out, we're only operating 80% of commuter services. So when you adjust volume wise, now you're getting that apples to oranges in essence, but we're not running those extra buses. We're at about 60 to 65% recovery. The routes that are performing the strongest go into the Pentagon, as you would expect. And that's something that I've been saying now for about 4 or 5 months, and it still tracks to be consistent. So we're adjusted to that net 60% range. One of the things to consider is because we do have that bell curve of ridership, historically, we offered a lower volume of services on Fridays. But we're operating that level of service almost now all week. It may be once we have some services in place and we see the workforce come back, we may further reduce and adjust for that. So we're paying very, very, very close attention. Local ridership remains at 70 to 75%. And the senior community is not really returned. That was a very large volume of ridership for us. Obviously, the increased health risk there. And hopefully as they return, Nova Community College was also a major impact for us in our ridership. And then retail workers. So as those groups come back, we fully expect our ridership to be pre-pandemic or above on our local services. We continue to monitor routes and trends every month. And of course, I'll mention again that we have all of our ridership data inside of our board packet. We are actively combining trips where necessary, but we may be faced with new challenges as passengers return. Our focus is as the federal workforce comes back, they will tell us where they want to ride. Based upon that, then we can make those adjustments. We may have a case where we do have normal services pre-pandemic 3 days a week, and now our Mondays are 70% of what it was, and then our Fridays are 60% of what it was. So that may be how it varies out. So a couple of other items behind the scenes, we've been collaborating with Prince William County EOC office, as well as VDOT and other regional transit systems regarding traffic and service impacts resulting from the various truck convoys. Right now, the convoys seem focused on traffic disruption. Welcome to the DMV. We'll see how it goes. However, all the regional agencies are ready to implement detours, emergency service plans necessary, so we are prepared. We've also been detouring quite successfully from a very abrupt 10-ton weight restriction enforced on the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge. I don't know if you've heard that, but they just sent us a message on Friday afternoon that says you can't cross the bridge no more. And so our buses are now detouring. It's really not causing a problem in the morning. It's just a little over a problem in the evening, just with that extra congestion. So obviously there was a safety concern with the bridge. We're all in the same boat with that. So we're all supportive, and hopefully we can get that addressed as they do the infrastructure work. So various OmniRide staff from both PRTC and Keolis, thank you guys very much for being out there with us, have been riding Route 68, which is the proposed conversion of the Manassas Park route to microtransit. We have multilingual staff on board. So in addition, with Spanish-speaking riders, we're also providing information on our upcoming March 16th listening session. So we're on the vehicle, talking to customers so they understand, here's what we're proposing, and letting them know that they can think about it, and they have beyond just this one chance on a bus. We've had multiple levels of outreach. As you know, we had a petition that was provided to us about don't change it. Our customer service staff called every single number on there. A lot of the people don't ride 68. They were just very supportive of signing a petition. So, but the key is it was good because we got feedback from them. And so we were able to talk to people who maybe didn't ride the route, but could give us feedback and ideas about the types of services that would look like. And we got some constructive feedback about opportunities there. So we've got that moving forward. I will point out, I'm going to rattle off some dates. Don't worry, you'll get all of this information in your wrap up. But that is on March 16th at Manassas Park City Hall. We've already shared the flyers with Manassas and Manassas Park, but we'll provide them to the full commission. Meanwhile, we're making progress on our mobile ticketing pilot, which will be slated to begin in late April. Joe Stainsby, our Chief Development Officer, is leading that charge. The app's designed, and they're working on background web programming for that. Our Vanpool Alliance has started providing quarterly environmental impact statements to program vendors so they can, and regional stakeholders to bolster grant applications. So we can continue to keep those opportunities flowing, and marketing campaigns to rebuild the Vanpool market, which was obviously heavily impacted. I also welcome all the commissioners to come join us on March 17th and 18th for Operator and Technician Appreciation Day. The most amazing tacos in Northern Virginia will be back. They have these amazing pork belly tacos. So come early because they'll be gone early because I'm coming early. So it'll be at our Manassas facility on the 17th. It'll be at this facility on the 18th. So come by for lunch, say thank you, share, smile. It'll be nice to gather. Hopefully we'll also be celebrating if everything goes well the lifting of the federal mask mandate. So as you know, CDC has their guidelines, but because airline, rail infrastructure, transit, et cetera, if it's FTA or just really USDOT, the mask mandate's in place. So this is the closest we've come to it ending without having it restarted. So we're glad to have that moving forward. And then finally, the 7th annual Northern Virginia Transportation Roundtable will take place on Wednesday, March 30th with NVTA. And I'll be on a panel for electric vehicles discussing our progress on this front and some of the industry trends. We'll also send out the link if you've not heard of this. It's virtual. So, you know, it's just a great opportunity to hear what's going. It's a half-day session, so you can dip in, dip out as necessary. but still catch up on some of the different trends. So from here, I'd like to welcome Barbara Murdoch, General Manager of our of Keolis for our operations group. Give us an update.
Good evening, commissioners, and happy Women's History Month. Today, Keolis made history because we just hired our first female maintenance technician, and we are so proud of that. I've been trying to hire a female mechanic for over 20 years. She comes to us from the public works community, and she is one of 2 technicians that will start as we launch our new apprenticeship program. And remember last month I told you about that $5,000 incentive? Well, it looks like it worked for our maintenance department. And we know maintenance is one of the most important pieces in this operation. And finding a good maintenance manager pre-COVID was hard, and now it gets even harder. But we think we found, after 6 months of looking, we found the perfect fit. And I'd like to introduce you to our new maintenance manager who started on Monday. His name is Thomas Halleck, and he has an extensive background in fleet maintenance, along with a distinguished military background. He's a proud Navy man of 20 years of service and 3 overseas deployments. I'm going to introduce you. Tom, come say a few words.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, Barbara. That was very nice. As Barbara said, my name is Tom Halleck. I'm thrilled to be here. Just started on Monday. I bring to the table 38 years maintenance background. I started off 17 years hands-on technician. Owned and operated my own business for 3 years down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I worked as a maintenance instructor on the AMRAP, or mine-resistant ambush protected vehicle platforms, for 3 years. Rider truck for 10 years, where I served as a senior maintenance manager, where I oversaw 8 locations, 2,100 heavy trucks, and about 150 maintenance employees. As far as my military service, I've served in the Navy Reserve for 20 years. I'm a construction mechanic senior chief. To Barbara's point, I've deployed 3 times, Iraq, 04, again, 07, 08, and recently just returned from a 14-month deployment in Djibouti, Africa, where I served as a senior enlisted advisor for the Public Works Department. So just got back, just released off active duty February 3rd. I actually applied for a position with Keolis down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and they said, boy, we got a great opportunity for you. So several Zoom calls later, here I am. I started Monday. Everybody's been great. The folks OmniRide and Keolis have been fantastic. I appreciate the warm reception. They've allowed me to really hit the ground running and identify issues. We've got a lot of opportunity already just in the first 4 days. We've identified a lot of opportunity in improving the parts program, allocating parts. Barbara's given us pretty much carte blanche to do whatever we need to do to make that happen. We hired our first, on my 3rd day here, we interviewed our first female technician, which is amazing. Besides her background in the public works community, she also served in the Navy for 3 years as an aviation ordnance person, which is pretty cool. So she was actually on the decks of aircraft carriers loading ordnance on functions. So she's structured, and she's going to serve me at that. We're putting together an apprenticeship program. I've been working on that already the first few days. So we're developing an apprenticeship program. We're going to put develop tools. We're hiring a full-time trainer. We have a beautiful classroom over there at our NASA's facility that we're going to set up specifically for maintenance training. And it's just a lot of stuff I could go on and on. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity. I'm thrilled to be here, and again, glad to be part of the team and looking forward to driving it. So thank you.
Lastly, I think the commission set goals for the executive director to kind of cross-train and immerse himself with Keolis. So as part of Thomas' training starting out, Dr. Snyder will go through the training as well. That's it.
Last month I did new driver hiring, and I was late. first day of work. My daughter's school bus didn't show up, so I had to take her to school. So then we called. I know, you get yelled at by the supervisor. So on that note, thank you very much, Barbara. And then I did want to point you to the industry article authored by Parent Pilot Strand. It's a good read because it's recapping some of the effort and innovation to retool the metro routes and services. And there's a bus transformation working group that was called for as part of this project and task. And you would expect for Metro's own bus transformation group to pick one of their own to lead it. They did not. They picked one of our own, Parent Pilot Strand. So he's the chair of the Metro area. Feather in the cap in addition, and that's an example of just the leadership we've got. Byron's leading a statewide and regional safety program that's brought in school district. We're working a lot of different areas to really grow and be leaders beyond just our transportation services. So taking full advantage of that. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's it.
Thank you, Dr. I just want to say, as we talk about ridership and getting folks back on the bus, it's a cultural change because the last 2 years, although it was COVID, people got into a new form of process of how they've been moving about. And so it's going to take, us kind of breaking the mold of letting them know that this service is back out here to exist. And I want to be specific about the service because what you just heard about Perrin being elected as the chair of this regional commission is a result of the staff that is here at Prtc and Keolis with our services that we have for our operators. The region has recognized how well run and how adaptable this organization has been through COVID and through this mind shift of getting people to refocus and re-gear back to this. We've never missed a beat with our buses, and everyone knows that. We've had buses running with 1 and 2 people on it. We've gone into the city still. We've managed a federal program that we now know the federal employees are coming back to work, but they're going to change a lot of what they do. So they're going to be working more than likely 3 days in the office, a couple days from home, which is going to change the dynamics of how the bus system is going to accommodate for that. But we've been the leader in the industry to work around that and have been ahead of it all. So I'm just saying all that to give really this PRTC staff and our executive director Bob Snyder really some serious round of applause for and then I'm going to end on a sad note by saying I feel like Tom and our new hire is recruiting a lot of Navy here. As an Army guy, I feel like we need to really walk in and I'm very excited about everything you're doing because you literally sat there and haven't even been here long and talked about the direction that we're going, which is another step in the right direction for what are we doing. So because I want to keep on time, we have no presentations, which is why I was able to slide that in there. But we do have 3 action items that we need to vote on. And the first one is going to be authorize staff to refer the budget to jurisdictions for consideration and hold public hearings.
Yes.
You want to?
Let me tee this up, Joyce. You can go ahead and get ready for the presentation. So if you recall, each year what we do is we present a proposed budget to you, including our assumptions for revenues, expenditures, and where it balances. We identify the key areas where costs have gone up, things that we want to do in terms of service enhancements, et cetera. As we move into the new fiscal year, we want to do some new service enhancements. So we're including that in there. This is not you approving a budget. This is you approving us to transmit the budget forward to the jurisdictions. However, if, for example, one of the items in here is Sunday service in Prince William County on Eastern Park, if that is in this room, a non-starter, you can give us guidance and direction to transmit with removing that from it so that we're not putting that busy work in front of your body, if that makes any sense. So that's what this does. One thing so that's a part of the process. So then we'll have our public hearings for a normal process. The 6 jurisdictions will go through the usual budgetary process. And then based on what we hear back, if there are reductions in process, et cetera, we then bring back to you the balanced budget. What got in, what got out, and then you adopt that budget. An example of that is 2 years ago, we removed Wheels to Wellness from that. But through Prince William County's separate process, it got added in and funded elsewhere. So it doesn't necessarily mean that something may not get done. It just may get done a different way. So I just wanted to tee that up. This is Joyce Embry, our Director of Finance, and she will give the presentation. If you have questions going along, it's better to ask then or wait till the end. What do you think?
Maybe wait till the end.
Yeah, that way you see everything in case the question gets answered.
I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Can we reprint that slide? I forgot to bring my packet.
Supervisor Locke, I can,
No, I'll see. I'll go. Thank you. Thank you.
So tonight I'm presenting the FY 2023 proposed PRTC budget. After the presentation, the commission will be asked to approve agenda item 11.1, which authorizes the transmittal of the budget to the jurisdictions for approval. Here are the major challenges we considered as we prepared the FY 23 budget. COVID-19 impacts, which started being felt in March 2020, continued into FY 21, FY 22, and will continue into FY 23. Impacts have been felt on bus service, ridership levels, and fare box revenue. PRTC has provided Friday-only service levels, which is 85% of pre-pandemic service levels for the express bus services since June of 2020, which will continue in FY 23. There have been no changes in service for Metro Express, Local East-West Express, and Access. The average express bus ridership is at 40% of pre-pandemic levels. The average local bus ridership is 65% of pre-pandemic levels, which varies by the day of week. We continue to incur costs for goods and services such as PPE, hand sanitizer, and additional cleanings to mitigate risks. PRTC is using federal COVID-19 economic relief funding to close the gap. Here is the FY 23 budget broken down between operating and capital. 50.8 million operating and 10.6 million capital for a total budget of 61.4 million. The following slides will go into more details. Here is a comparison of the FY 22 budget and the FY 23 budget. There is an increase of 10 million in operating expenses and a reduction of 500,000 in capital expenses for an overall increase of 9.5 million compared to the FY 22 budget. You will notice the passenger revenue dropped 600,000 from FY 22, resulting from reducing ridership estimates from 47% to 40% compared to pre-pandemic levels. If you can go back to the last slide, please. The net federal grants increase is 10.2 million from FY 22, primarily from the use of federal pandemic relief funds. State grants increased by 4.1 million from FY 22, with anticipated additional operating and capital assistance. Overall, jurisdictional subsidies dropped by 4 million for both operating and capital from FY 22, after the use of 18 million of federal COVID-19 relief funds to reduce OmniRide Express and OmniRide Local operating subsidies by 75%. The major increases in operating expenses, which will be explained later in the presentation: salaries and fringe benefits, 1.2 million, bus service contract, 6.5 million, and diesel fuel, 1 million. We know you may have questions, but this is a snapshot of the changes between the two fiscal years. Mr. Chairman.
Are you okay, Joyce, if we ask you questions now or wait?
Did we decide if we're gonna wait?
Yeah, we were gonna wait.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
This slide shows the major revenue categories and the percentage makeup of the budget. For the FY 23 budget, passenger revenue is accounting for 4.9 million, or 10% of the operating budget, compared to 13% of the FY 22 operating budget. With the use of 18 million of federal COVID-19 economic relief funding to support operations, federal and state grants account for 70%, and jurisdictional subsidies account for 20% of operating in FY 23. This compares to federal and state grants accounting for 45% and jurisdictional subsidies accounting for 41% of operating in FY 22. On the capital side, federal and state grants account for 68% and jurisdictional subsidies account for 32% of capital in FY 23. This compares to federal and state grants accounting for 92% and jurisdictional subsidies accounting for 8% of capital for FY 22. Regarding revenue assumptions, for passenger revenue, we have assumed no fare increase in FY 23. The last fare increase was in FY 18. Fares will continue to be free for Metro Express, Local, East-West Express, and Access. Revenue from ridership is estimated at 40% compared to pre-COVID levels, down from 47% assumed in FY 22. The graph shows farebox revenue history from July 2018 to January 2022. You will notice the significant drop in revenue in April 2020 due to the pandemic. Actual FY 21 farebox revenue was 1.98 million. The average monthly farebox revenue for the first 6 months of FY 22 is about 270,000, which if you double that for the year, it's about 3.2 to 3.5 million. Here's a summary of the federal COVID-19 economic relief funding for PRTC. Of the 9.3 million CARES funds, there was approximately 2 million remaining at June 30, 21. 10.6 million of Prtc and 17.9 million of ARPA funds are available. We estimate that 4.3 million will be used to support FY 22 and 18.1 million to support FY 23, leaving 8 million to support FY 24. As ridership and revenue increase and expenses are contained, less federal pandemic economic relief funding will be used, increasing the amount available to support FY 24. For state grants, DRPT operating assistance for FY 22 was originally 5.4 million, with the Commonwealth Transportation Board approving an additional 3.6 million to be received in the last quarter of FY 22 for an overall total of 9 million. Since DRPT has indicated that there should be one more year, FY 23, with higher operating assistance levels, PRTC has assumed FY 23 DRPT operating assistance at 80% of FY 22 revised actuals for 7.2 million. DRPT also provides commuter assistance for rideshare, employer outreach, and Van Start, Van Save, and continues to support currently funded services for the I-95, 395, and I-66 transit TBM. For capital assistance, 68% for vehicle purchases and 0% for other capital, which is hardware, software, furniture, equipment, which is 100% local. We have assumed continued support from the Commuter Choice Program for currently funded services. We have updated fuel tax revenue projections for FY 22 and FY 23. Fuel tax revenue for FY 21 decreased by almost 5% from FY 20 actuals. Consumption went from 475.5 million gallons to 456.8 million gallons. The Virginia Department of Taxation estimates statewide consumption to grow by 4.8% from FY 21 to FY 22, up from taxation's original projection of 0.3%. PRTC has used these growth estimates to revise its FY 22 projections based on 478.7 million gallons and forecasts the FY 23 based on 480.6 million gallons. As you are aware, motor fuels tax revenue is reduced by PRTC's share of the Commuter Rail Operating and Capital Fund, CROC, based on PRTC's percentage of the VRE subsidy, which is 63.1% or 9.47 million for FY 23. Prince William County continues to use MBTA 30% funds for VRE subsidies, which is 4.4 million for FY 23. We anticipate that the Prince William County will retain a positive fuel tax fund balance through FY 23. This slide shows the major expense categories and the percentage makeup of the budget. For the FY 23 budget, salaries and fringes make up about 14% of the operating budget. The bus service contract makes up 62% and fuel 7%. Those four line items make up about 83% of the total operating budget. There is a $1.2 million increase for salaries and fringe benefits from FY 22 to FY 23. The FY 23 budget includes 1.5 new FTEs, a transportation support associate and a part-time field specialist at a cost of $144,000, including benefits. We intend to include these positions in grant applications for cost recovery. There will be 50 FTEs with the new positions. An intern has been included for $39,000, including benefits, which will be funded 80% state, 20% local. We have assumed a 6% COLA merit at a cost of $243,000. We have also assumed a midpoint salary adjustment for staff using the pay scale from the compensation study at a cost of $500,000. Additional fringe costs for current staff is $250,000 with a fringe rate of 42% compared to 41% for FY 22. Here are some other expense assumptions. We included $600,000 for the Western facility operating costs. The Wheels to Wellness program will be funded in FY 23 by anticipated residual funds received from Prince William County in FY 22. The FY 23 budget includes $113,000 for diversity, equity, and inclusion study recommendations, such as employee survey, DEI consulting, DEI training, supervisor development, and the mentor program. Some increases in professional services included $100,000 for mobile ticketing, the commuter assistance programs to strategic plan, $100,000, which is funded 50% by the state, 50% local, and MS Office 365 rollout support of $80,000. For service assumptions, we have assumed Friday only service levels for the express bus service for all of FY 23, which represents about 85% of service. For FY 23, paratransit continues on the western side. We are proposing the introduction of microtransit on the western side in Manassas Park and Lake Fall, which would replace Manassas Park local route 68. At the same time, we will introduce increased OmniRide local frequency on Manassas Route 65, increasing from every 90 minutes to every 45 minutes. We are also proposing the introduction of microtransit on the eastern side in the winter for Dumfries, Triangle, Town of Quantico, which would replace the Town of Quantico taxi shuttle. For FY 23, we are also proposing the introduction of Sunday Eastern Local and Prince William Metro Express in the fall. which will mimic existing Saturday service levels. We have assumed that the current funding will remain in FY 23 for grant-funded services that PRTC is currently providing. PRTC applied for TRIP funds, the Transit Ridership Increase Program, for increased midday Manassas Metro Express service at about $600,000, 80% state, 20% local. There may also be expanded I-66 commuter express services and potential I-95 FredX commuter express services that would be grant funded. We are including a contingency of 6 daily platform hours to allow for schedule adjustments. The bus service contract line increased by $6.5 million from the FY 22 budget to the FY 23 budget. The bus contractor blended hourly rate for 2 facilities and current service levels was negotiated in May 2021 for FY 22, $110.33, while it was budgeted at $99.50. There is a 6% increase from $110.33 for FY 22 to $116.95 in FY 23. The table shows the components of the $6.5 million budget increase. $2.6 million from the FY 22 additional cost above the budgeted rate, which has been offset by federal economic relief funding, additional state funding, and grant funded bus services. $1.6 million from the FY 23 increase in rate. $1.7 million from the FY 23 additional hours, and $600,000 from FY 23 additional nights. Of the $6.5 million increase, $1.7 million is related to grant-funded bus services. The diesel fuel line is increasing by $1 million between FY 22 and FY 23 budgets. The estimated price per gallon in the FY 22 budget is $2 and is $2.75 for FY 23. In April of 2021, PRTC acquired fuel futures through our fuel supplier for FY 22. 966,000 of the 1.3 million gallons, or 74% of the fuel, at a price of $1.80 per gallon, with the remainder of the fuel purchased at rack pricing. And you'll notice for FY 21 actuals, it was 1.63 per gallon of diesel, and FY 22 actuals through January is $1.84 per gallon. For capital expenditures, have remained about the same as FY 22. Bus replacements include 10 35-foot local buses funded 5 federal, state, and local, and 5 state and local. Bus expansion includes 4 paratransit vehicles funded state and local. The expansion buses will not be purchased until ridership levels return. The FY 23 budget includes $2.6 million for the transit center storm water management system repair and replacement funded by state and local. Here are the jurisdictional subsidies comparing FY 22 and FY 23. Overall subsidies have dropped $4 million compared to FY 22, primarily the result of using $18 million of federal COVID-19 relief funds to reduce 75% of the Omni-Ride Express and local operating subsidies. Total subsidies without the use of federal pandemic relief funds would have been $31.7 million, with Prince William County at $30.8 million. For the non-bus sponsoring jurisdictions, the admin subsidies went down due to anticipated additional PRPT operating assistance. The admin subsidies are allocated based on the jurisdiction's respective share of the overall fuel tax revenue, which is based on the county ordinance. And this is a pretty colorful slide. This graph shows the fuel tax fund balance history from the member jurisdictions, fiscal 1995 to fiscal 2021. It does not show projected fund balance for June 30, 22 and June 30, 23. Prince William County in blue has had the most dramatic ups and downs. The ups and downs are reflective of the amount of fuel tax revenue earned versus the amount spent on subsidies and other transportation projects. Next steps, tonight the commission will be asked with agenda item 11.1 to authorize the transmittal of the PRTC FY23 budget to the jurisdictions for approval. The resolution does not adopt the budget, it is to transmit to the jurisdictions. Public hearings will be scheduled in the spring for the budget and federal grant applications. The jurisdictions will approve the budget and subsidies in the April-May timeframe. We will come back to the board at the June commission meeting for approval of the FY23 budget. Bob will wrap up the budget presentation.
Yes, thank you. So a couple of key items. So obviously there's a jump in operating costs. A lot of that is directly tied to proposed services on 66, adding services. So a couple of things, increased frequency on the Manassas Route 65. You have the introduction of the Sunday services. We are the second largest population county in Virginia. We don't have any services on Sunday. That's been something that we've consistently heard feedback for. So it's our Sundays would match our Saturdays. So it's about 7 vehicles, is that 6? So we have that, the introduction of the 2 microtransit projects, applications for grants for the Manassas Tyson Metro Express for midday and reverse commute, and expanded I-66 commuter express services. Obviously, things like the $1 million of fuel, if we operate less service, we don't spend as much. This is supposed to be, last year was supposed to be the year that the pandemic went out. It's this year, and it's really the make or break year for most transit organizations. The feds provided this funding. We've done very, very well, as you saw, to trickle out money, but we are now at a point where we're either going to position ourselves to succeed and move forward, or the ridership isn't going to return. And so that's what we're positioned for. There's some asks in there, such as $500,000 to bring employees to midpoint. That's to bring employees to midpoint. So one of the things we did is we hired at the bottom of the range for new employees, and then they never got merit increases. So the COLA goes with the range. And that was one of the things that we identified as a concern area, is that we have employees that might work here for 10, 15 years, and they're still literally at the bottom of their pay range in that. So that's one of the challenges that we had in our compensation study that we identified. And if we don't ask for it, we can never get it addressed. So that's included. It does not mean we will spend all $500,000, because not every employee, it's not bringing everyone to midpoint, but we had to do some level of budgeting. We did put in 5% COLA because of the inflation rates. We don't know where they're going to land. So that's just something that's a concern area. So that's a huge item, and we put in 1% merit, not knowing where the other localities would land. So we had to plug these numbers in months ago, not knowing what those projections would be. How accurate are our numbers for the fringe increases? Okay, pretty accurate. So I just didn't know if that was us doing guesswork or we've gotten our quotes in a row. Okay, so those are the key items that are driving a lot of this. If the ridership doesn't come back, we're going to be in position of having to gut services over the next year. It's a very honest, it's a clear statement. But we've been saying the pandemic's going to end. We've finally got the federal workforce recalling people, and we're seeing the ridership return. We have empty seats on buses. Every time someone climbs on board, we recover $6.90. The more people that ride, the less federal dollars we spend, the less, and as you can see, we're already reducing the jurisdictional spend as a goal to have your dollars at your jurisdictional level stretch further. So we had our presentation yesterday, went over it again, and talked to staff aggressively today and told them point blank, everyone in the building has to pull forward to get chutes and seats, because we're not going to have an organization.
That's the new slogan.
And it's real. But the good news is, we are starting to see the ridership increase. You heard what Rich described. We're seeing the same thing. One of the telltale things will be for us, however, is we're not proposing a fare increase. And the reason we're not proposing a fare increase is we want to maintain that welcoming environment. But here's something we want to watch. Historically, we really haven't, passengers rode 5 days a week. You're a federal commuter. So a great example of this is a federal commuter is what happens when you run out of money at the end of the month. Either shelled out or slug.
Absolutely.
So we know that, but if you're only traveling in 3 days a week, you now have more money on your card. We can if we start to see the trend where they're not traveling in 5 days a week, the IRS just increased the transit benefit, I believe, $280. Now, I don't know if the feds are doing that as well, but that's the pattern. And if so, we can come in with the potential for a mid-year fare increase, because now you won't be in that. You're only traveling in 3 days a week. We can pull in more of that federal money. We can harvest more of the fare box without dipping into your personal pocket. And that's one of the things we've always had to balance is if we increase fares, if you go beyond the IRS limit or what the federal benefit is, you're dipping into individual pockets. Sometimes that's appropriate. In this stage, maybe it's not, but we'll see what the ridership patterns are. And really what we do is we will track to see, we don't know who the human behind the card is, but we can track accounts and see how many days a week they're riding. And we can pull data out of the WMATA fare collection system, and we can make mid-year fare adjustments. So that's another way that as ridership increases and we don't get to where we need, we can then increase our fares potentially to recover some of those costs to still keep those options available. And those are some of the key trends. And again, I want to stress, we're seeing, so with the new Western facility opening, I-66 opens in December. So we're expecting a lot of ridership to move there. We've been in conversations with the state based on what the concessionaire amounts. They may come to us and say, hey, we need more service operated. We have to be prepared for that. We're also seeing 10 to 15% increase, depending on the item, for our part supply. And so we cover the variable rate for that. So things, I mean, our fleet staff. So if we're having to overnight parts in order to get that ship replaced so that the bus can run. So those are some of the supply chain issues that we're facing, and we're having to incur those costs because the way we set the contract up with Keolis, and it's been very, very beneficial to us for about a year, in that when we needed to lower the cost of services, we dialed down the cost of services, and we've saved a lot of money in 2020 and 2021. 2022, we're supposed to have our ridership back. It was supposed to start really returning to us in October, and it didn't return. Omicron got us. So here we are. So we're using the federal dollars to our advantage. So if there's things that you as a commissioner or body say, you know what, again, we don't want, based on the dollar amounts, this level of with the Sunday service, or yes to this, no to that, give us some indication here so we can make our adjustments, or we can transmit it as is, and then you can meet as your individual bodies and then tell us what you're willing to spend. And then we can make the adjustments and bring something back to you. So at this point, I turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to give the, when we open up for questions, I'm going to give the first question, comments to Commissioner Lawson here, because she started. But I want to thank you, Joyce, because you ran that presentation. You were on fire. We let you get through it. Great job on it. And thank you, Dr. Snyder, for, filling in the rest of that board. I know we have a lot of questions. I will say this, back to the original point that I was making about we have to change the curve, the mindset of people to get back to the bus. Unfortunately, I believe this is our gamble year. This is the year that we should be investing in getting our buses out there, so folks can see them and understand this is back in full service to get them back on. Now, I will say that if in fact like Sunday service doesn't work, or we're seeing that this is not working, I like what you said about, at the end of the year, we have to make some tough decisions on, what do we cut and what do we start actually downside and cover not quite there yet, because we just don't want to, not be good stewards of taxpayers' dollars. We all know that. But I think right now is the time where we really should be pushing everything that we're attempting to do here to get folks back on the bus. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Joyce, can you go back to the $615,000 reduction in passenger revenue. One of your first slides.
Yeah, Carl, it's the FY 22-23 budget comparison slide. It's about the fourth one in.
I don't recall, what was the explanation for the expected reduction?
It's just, ridership estimates.
We projected, I can answer that for you. We projected a 47% ridership return and fares to go with it. Based on what we're seeing now, we're doing a more conservative fare box estimate. So that's why we've set that. So last year we were more optimistic. This year we're more pessimistic. And that's why there's that assumed reduction. Just that way we have a more conservative fare box recovery.
Is that because we've underperformed our projections for FY 22?
Yes, the ridership did not return. We had hoped to see bodies back in October. They just haven't shown up.
Okay, so we're learning from that, that we're more pessimistic. And that's $600,000. And then the $6.5 million increase, was that to operating?
Yes, right here. That's the bus service contract and incentives. That is,
Yeah. So talk to me about that.
so that's a combination of the
And
increased
I'm sorry,
cost.
real quick, can you pull that slide up while he's talking?
It's the increased cost for the Western facility as part of it, because with Keolis, we're asking them to provide more mechanics, more dispatchers.
Carl, it's slide 15.
So we have that, but in addition, that's where the services, the increased services in Route 65, which is the Sunday Road corridor for clarification.
Right.
And in addition
So those
to
are local?
local, and then also the Sunday service on the eastern side would be local, and the micro transit would be local. All of that is delivered by Keolis, and then also we have the regional funds plus the growth
I'm
of.
sorry,
Sure.
sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think that's the
No,
slide.
it's, Carl is the slide before that one.
It's Carl Greenwood. I feel like.
One before that, sorry. I'm guessing. There you go.
Thanks, Carl. Wherever you are. So, sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Snyder, but seeing the visual while you're talking is helpful to me.
So that's the additional services
Okay,
in here, so
Now,
the additional
so-
load.
but those are local and, well, if the 66 services that are supposed to start, the additional services in December, that would be 6 months of FY 23 that we're gonna run those additional. So you have additional commuter services and local services in that 1.7?
Yes.
Okay. In addition to like the Sunday service.
Correct. All enhanced services would be included in these two line items, the additional loads and the additional hours.
Okay, what's the difference?
With, how do I explain this? So we don't have to necessarily run all that at the same time. So we may use different software providers, or we may end up using a taxi voucher program, some other means and mechanism. Aaron, do you want to give a better explanation?
For the micro transit, yes, we would go through Keolis. It's at a lower rate to operate that versus
Okay.
the actual fixed truck
Okay.
services, so they separate that out.
Okay.
And it's not scheduled from like say 7 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. It's
So
got
it's
some
not
demand.
customized.
Yeah.
And so that 600,000 is strictly micro transit. And then the increase in rates, since we're not increasing passenger revenue, passenger fares, that increase in rate, the rate of what?
That's the hourly rate we pay Keolis.
Okay,
So
so
that's-
that's specific to labor.
Correct. So drivers, their fringe benefits,
Okay,
all of
that's-
those things.
I'm assuming built into our Keolis contract. Okay. And then additional cost contracted budgeted rate. So,
This is when we budgeted last year, this time last year, we didn't have the Western facility open. We weren't sure what it was going to be. Once that opened, we incurred costs there, plus the pass-through of costs of all the expenses we've seen. So
Okay,
we've seen about almost 10% across the board costs in a lot of our supply chain items. So it's between 6 and 10%. And that is a pass-through of expenses to us. So that is the supply chain and the inflationary items, plus the adding of the Western facility, and then just the increases in fringe costs. And that would just come with it.
right. So when we added that Western facility, we built in, we knew that these additional operating costs
Yes.
were on the horizon. And then I'm sorry, the last question I have, sorry, Mr. Chairman, but what does that mean, blended hourly rate?
So what we do is we have two different rates. One is their known monthly costs. So Barbara, her salary, right? That doesn't vary based on how much service we operate. So things that are going to be fixed fees or fixed costs, they get set in a fixed rate. And so that includes overhead, IT, things that they're going to have no matter what. Piece of furniture, things like that. The variable costs are then based on how many buses we're running and the cost of parts or what it takes to deliver services. So if we decided to reduce services by half, our variable rate would plummet, but the fixed remains the same. When you then take the numerator and the denominator and just blend those costs, that gives you what would be a true rate. So the blended rate can change, but it's really based on how many hours of service you run. So the higher the volume of service, the lower the blended rate goes because you're dividing the fixed cost among each hour.
This is a good accounting refresher. Right? Thanks.
All right. Commissioner Vega and then Commissioner Bailey.
Thank you. Talk to me a little bit more about the Sunday service. Have we done any studies? What is justifying the need? Because I'm not okay with just because everybody else has it, we're going to get it. Where's the demand for this?
So customer feedback, number one. Number two, the number of
Sorry,
stores.
not to put you off. When you say customer feedback, what are we talking about? Just, someone submitting a comment saying we don't have Sunday service, or do we actually have data in terms of how many people would actually be interested in this service?
Both. So I can get you the data. What we have is when we have our meet the planners or we have community outreach sessions, we collect every comment, complaint, concern. But what we also hear from employers, we hear from people trying to get to work. So we hear that from retail establishments frequently. We hear that quite frankly, we get complaints about that. So we'll have our planning team pull all that information for you and got it back.
One thing, do you think we could, I don't know if you have that data, collect that data and send that.
Oh, yes,
absolutely. So that then we
Yeah.
know why we're
Yes,
doing what
absolutely.
we're doing. Okay. Commissioner Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do know just from my colleague that for the poll that you did in my district, that was a concern because there's a lot of retail and commercial. They're not able to get to work nor to church. So I know that was a concern in terms of that.
Yes.
So that'd be interested to see. I have three questions. One is the 8 point, and this is excellent presentation. The 8.1 million that you mentioned on the slide, that's a rollover you said for FY24.
Yes.
Okay, so that's ARPA funding, correct? Or
Yes, and that's one of those things, we have 3 parts of the CARES for something. So as we spend, it would be the remaining amount. So
Okay.
right now, we're estimating $8 million.
yes, yes.
That would be available for FY24. And what we're anticipating could be that as more people come back to work and as other, as our revenues increase, and if we're able to contain costs, that will have more than $8 million available to roll into that budget.
24. But can we use that also for FY23? No? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, for some reason we needed more in FY23. Yes, we could do so.
Okay.
But this is what we were anticipating that we would have available for FY24. Now, out of the 3 pots, ARPA is the one that has a time
Yes.
constraint as far as
That's
that.
why. Yes.
Right. So, we're going to be looking at setting up our spending in such a way that we ensure that those funds are spent by the time.
They'll probably be spent first. So CARES is
Okay.
applied for. Now we're in the phase of
I'm
applying
spending
for the next two.
Mhm.
So we'll apply for and then spend ARPA first because it has that time limit to it.
Okay, okay. And then the second question I have, thank you. Thank you so much for, I think it's a great thing that you built in for the intern and the strategic planning, because I know that was an opportunity too, about physical, so that's great with that. And then I want to also thank you for building into the budget, the micro transit for companies. Because that's something we talked about here in the meeting. But also, you and I previously had a meeting with Michael Bates and the mayor, and that was so thank you for responding to that, including that. I really appreciate it. And then lastly, I want to ask, on your slides where you have the bar.
The colorful brown?
Yes, that's very good. It was a very nice colorful brown. Where you had Prince William County was, that, yes, that one. Yeah, can you just kind of give me some examples in terms of?
Yeah, so when you look, well, I'm gonna get
Not
close,
switch
which I
on
can
the
actually
spot.
see this down here. So when you get to the very top back in the day, it's like fiscal 2007, 2008. That was back when we were like flush with fuel tax money. The county was also using general fund money to help support PRTC. And then we had the recession. And so at that point, the county said, we're no longer able to give, we're no longer able to give general fund money. And so, we had that big drop in the, because we started using more of the fuel tax. And then we were able to kind of get it back up. And because one of the things too, the county, which year, they chose to use the MBTA 30% money for VRE subsidies. So then that left the fuel tax strictly for PRTC and the bus. So you can just see it kind of ebbs and flows, with the price of fuel. I can remember back in the day when it was 99 cents a gallon for gas, back around fiscal 99, back over down here. The county fuel tax fund balance basically almost at zero. And so even though I was living down south, I was trying to buy my gas up in Prince William to support the cause. So anyway, it kind of built over time. So this is a fluctuation of the amount of fuel tax revenue that was earned and for what it's spent.
Okay.
So one thing to point out here, what this is when fuel prices dropped, this period of time, gas was $3.50 a gallon. Then, if you recall, the Saudis got mad at the Russians, and then they increased their production around 2015, 2016, and the price plummeted. Well, the price plummeted, it was tied to the cost of gas. So we put a floor in, worked really hard legislatively, got the floor in, and then suddenly you have the increase in motor fuels. Then we hit a recession. A pandemic, which created a massive drop in the volume of fuel being pumped. So that's what you're seeing in this time period is that, summer of 2021, now we're starting to see more, but how many Teslas do you see?
Right.
So I think the projection is what almost for a gallon consumption is almost identical next year as this year. Yet we know more miles are being traveled and we know more houses are being built, yet it's a flat revenue stream. And that's one of the key issues. So in terms of revenue projection.
What if you didn't change to the highs or the lows?
Yes, I believe you are doing debt service, starting right about here. Is that sound
I'm
right?
just saying, look at Manassas, Seminole, Park, though.
Yeah.
Small jurisdictions, and even like Ridership, is a little more off than we were, but yeah.
And most of when you see things like these massive drops from Stafford, that's typically tied to specialized projects that they finally got constructed and built and then did a fiscal drawdown for. So.
Thank you.
Do you want to chime in on that? And I'll get, if you good, can you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, well, you also got higher gas prices now, so I don't recall exactly when those started going up, but in the last 12 months, right? So you're saying it's a flat revenue stream, even though there's Teslas on the road and we know people are driving more than they were a year ago.
Correct.
But gas prices are incredibly higher than they were a year ago.
So they've adjusted the way, instead of it being, what was it, it used to be 4 cents per gallon. They've now changed with the omnibus legislation where it doesn't
Okay.
map it, it maps to inflation,
Okay.
not the market value.
That's what I was gonna ask you, because I remember we worked hard to get that floor. But do we have a ceiling? Is there a ceiling in that bill, or is that what you're referring
It's
to?
really, it's tied to the index of inflation, so we're not victims of the lows.
Lows or highs?
We don't get rich on the highs, but we don't burn out on the lows.
Okay.
So really, it's consumption driven. Now, again, if we have massive inflation, then it's indexed to inflation, then we get more money, but then we're also paying a lot more to acquire the fuel.
True.
So there's no win in that. It's good to have that stability from a internal standpoint. It doesn't help from an external standpoint of bringing in money. So that's one of the big challenges. That's why we're seeing flat revenues there. And it's something the state has talked about extensively. Hence, that's why they were trying to get the 5-cent gas tax increase to catch up and then have it indexed at that point. So that's some of the challenges we face. And it's something all the localities are going to face no matter where you are. Just as there's less gas same gas being pumped, more miles traveled. You're having increased maintenance costs and congestion costs, but less money to help you pay for it.
All right, we got Commissioner Allen, Commissioner Bowley, and we're gonna close the question. If anyone wanted to make a motion, we're gonna go for a motion, we'll move on from there. Commissioner Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I have about a couple of questions.
I don't apologize. This is good.
Go for it.
Go for it.
So my first question is, it's kind of tied into what Bob talked about a little bit, but these are more general questions. So I get to do the feedback to staff, or our staff always has follow-up questions I can't really answer if I don't ask them. So I know you mentioned that the federal relief grants are using subsidized fares, and you're saying that fares are going to remain stagnant until you see an increase in ridership. Now, if we don't see an increase in ridership, what metrics are we going to use to determine when we're going to start making that decision about services? And because if we're trying to transition the relief money to use more towards other services besides fare, but fares don't return, then how are we going to handle it?
So we need to see 55% ridership recovery, I would say by October 1.
Sorry, I've been writing such to say this.
We discussed this internally. 55% by October 1 is now we have a delta of services delivered versus services used of about 30%. And at that point, if it's not continuing to climb, we're going to have to start trimming back to meet in the middle. But that's where we need. That's at least we have some success. If we're not above 50% by October, I'm going to be worried.
Okay.
If we're not above, because we're sitting at 40% roughly now. If we don't have a 10% climb, which should be easy, we know we're in fantastic shape. And it's 70%, and I'm not talking about 70% of our capacity. I'm talking about 70% pre-pandemic. That's what we're looking at. The other thing we're going to look very closely at is we're trying to deliver flat services every day of the week, so that it's very consistent and the customers will tell us, they will vote with their feet. They will tell us what routes they want to travel on. They'll tell us what times they want to go, and they'll ride it. And if the buses are still empty at the other times of the day, they'll be pulled off, because we're at that point, the returns, assuming the pandemic is over and the recall's been fully in effect, it's got a roughly 6-month transition period from April to October. At that point, we should have a very good picture of what things look like. And at that point, then we can make the changes. We've always had a little bit of a bell curve. Monday was lower, weekend picked up, Fridays went lower than that. We may have a case where it's a really big bell curve, a really steep curve where we have a lot of services on Tuesday and Thursday, a little bit moderate Wednesday, and virtually nothing on Monday and Friday. That may be what we're staring at. So we're, Karen, is it a weekly ridership update you give me, basically about almost to the day of what the trends are? I can't believe he actually gave me a ridership report on the snow week when we only had about, the credit thing. I mean, we wanted to figure out who do we take into the district to get them home? Did everyone actually make it home that day? So in things like that, the staff is watching on a day-to-day basis, week to week, to track what the trends are. So it gives us that advantage because we have to stay limber. If we aren't, we're going to have customers standing at the bus stop waiting at a commuter lot and know that next vehicle isn't coming. So we have to watch the ridership on a consistent basis, especially right now in the next 6 weeks for this recall.
Second question is, I guess as we transition to endemic, because that's where we're heading, will mitigation costs become a standardized budget item? Because part of helping something to remain endemic is you're gonna have to have mitigation costs and like just become standardized. Because if not, then you're opening up potential variants popping up. So will that, because I know you guys mentioned briefly, but is that just gonna be a line item budget going forward so that we're prepared for that?
It will be, but it will be a different version of it. So we'll probably maintain a lot of the good health cleaning process and protocols. One thing that I think it's actually very good for transit. Transit kind of got away with being a little grungy for a long time, downright nasty in some cities and places. And I think that now this different perspective that cleanliness is not just convenience, cleanliness is safe. So the difference is we may not have the need to have cleaning staff come in all day and hitting high touch surfaces on a consistent basis. But we've already bought the temperature readers. We've already bought the air filtration system that sits in that corner that knocks a lot of that out. So we've already invested in a lot of the capital items. So now it's just more of maintaining that. Something we're very interested in doing, however, is for our local services, maintaining the midday touch-up cleaning. It's really not about sanitizing as much as it is giving just a great clean bus to a customer all day long. And so those are things that we're going to be looking at as the pandemic ends of what do we want to keep and maintain.
And then I guess final two questions, kind of tied, one is tied to the debt capacity, one is tied to, I guess, pushing the budget, because I didn't see much of that. They could be my fault, but if the General Assembly or the government decides to act for their this year, subsequent year, are we starting to prepare the budget to absorb some of that cushion from loss of revenue? And then on the same end, how will our debt capacity be impacted if we're trying to execute several bonds or projects with everything that's happening? That's taken into account.
Right. Really, that affects again through the CROC more of the bigger issue, but it's the first 15 million. So the debt capacity is protected. Where it would affect Stafford, anybody, is after that. So it's your motor fuels tax that would use to build an intersection, a sidewalk, expand a roadway. So all the transportation projects that you use outside of that funding VRE, that money goes to VRE and the debt service first. Then generally your finance department then funds the VRE spend out of that line item. And then what's left over, they use for other projects. So working backwards, logic says you'll be hit for the other projects while also losing the grocery tax. So you hit twice there, then you'll fund VRE. Then at the point where no one's collecting any motor fuels tax, then there's the risk of a failure on the debt service, which I think just doesn't exist. Because I mean, it's $15 million and it's through all the jurisdictions. So that's the first money out goes to VRE.
I just had two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's talk a little bit for a second about now that the Western facility is open. I know that you did say that, hey, halfway through the year it was up and running, so we had to incur those costs. Can you break down quickly how much we're saving in like deadheads and the other stuff that you sort of told us last year on why it's such a good idea to have the Western facility?
Yes, I don't have that data with me. So, but part of the downside is we're not operating our full slate of services. So we're not getting as much bang for the buck as a result of that when we made those decisions in 2018. But with 66 opening up, we'll see more services come in. And what we've done is the facility was paid for by NVTA, Prince William County, State of Virginia, et cetera. So we take all that. But the operating costs, we now build those into the grant application. applications. So when we have our field specialists, they go out and they study the route, how's it performing? They're doing the car counts and parking ride lots, things like that, checking for trash, all those things they wouldn't be doing that on that corridor if we didn't have the service. So we're now building those costs into the grant applications to do more recovery. Of course, the grant applications have to be approved. If they don't get approved, then we don't bring on the personnel unless we have a different way to pay for it.
My last question, Mr. Chairman. Shifting gears towards the Sunday service potentially. How, if we get the board, if the commission does approve that and we start piloting that out, what's the outreach like to major employers? I know that, as was said, retail, restaurants, those folks, they're working on Sunday regardless. And sometimes Sunday is their biggest day after church. You know, people are coming in at the end of the weekend, getting their shopping in Potomac Mill, which is just up the street in my district. How is the outreach going to be? And how are we going to start to monitor that once it starts to roll out?
So the outreach will be relentless. And what'll be great is the passengers that are currently riding, they're the ones that'll be immediately most excited and tell everyone that they can buy. We'll also do advertising on board the vehicle using our destination signs. We will generally do flyers, mailers, so we do direct mailing. Althea and her team have done that historically. Whenever we launch a new park and ride, for example, in an area, we blanket it with postcards and information, including the businesses. We've also got our connections with the chamber, the Woodbridge Civic Association, which has a number of businesses as part of that civic association. And we have an actual dedicated employee resource group. So part of the TDN group, Polly Morello, you met her at chamber events. She goes and she knocks on doors. So she has the relationship with, for example, Marine Base Quantico, reminds them, hey, this is an opportunity, an option. Meanwhile, we're all over Dumfries Triangle, including the gaming locations. So that's the tension that we want to have. Again, we want passengers. The more people that ride, the more federal assistance we get. The more people that ride our commuter services, the more money we bring. So it's a great thing to have a us.
Oh, second. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the budget from this body to send forward to your locality so that they can discuss the budget to bring back to this body. And then I think I said that right. Did I say that right, Mr. Kenneth? Okay, so I have a motion. It's been properly seconded. Any more discussion?
I'm sure. I'm sorry. This has happened. Sorry, it's been 2 years.
All our bodies have female chairs.
My bad, yeah, you don't look like a man. So it's not to approve it's to approve sending the budget. For clarity.
For clarity, yes, exactly. So, call for the roll.
And for clarity, I'm not sure who made the motion and second.
Bailey and I seconded.
Thank you. Victor Avery.
Aye.
Andrea Bailey. Aye. Penny Bodie.
Aye.
Margaret Franklin. Aye. Janine Lawson. Aye. Nestle Vega. Yes. Tanisha Allen.
Yes.
Monica Gary.
Yes.
Pamela Sebesti.
Yes.
Jeanette Ruschel.
Yes.
Matthew Kelly.
Yes.
Deborah Frazier.
Yes.
Lori Hayes.
Aye.
Todd Horsley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion is approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item, action item is the resolution to authorize the executive director to purchase replacement cycle buses and buses to expand the commuter and local bus fleet. Let me give a little bit more. It authorizes the purchase of 4 commuter and 3 local and metro express service to replace buses at or beyond their useful life, and 11 commuter and 1 local bus for service expansion. And just a note, the service expansion buses are 100% funded by outside sources, having been using older contingency fleet buses until buses could be purchased.
Yes, so based upon the question we just had, the obvious question is then why are we buying buses, right? I believe we have some slides that we want to show you real quick. Okay, so what we want to do is show you fleet planning this year and 2 years prior and 2 years after. So I'm going to get up and give this presentation to you. Very straightforward. We did this exact process back in November of 2018. Because they do it November 2018, what's the 5-year fleet plan gonna look like? Then we put it in the budget work for 2019, which gets approved in summer, which is the close of the fiscal year. Hello, pandemic. We had planned on 3, well, we did 0. The next year we had planned on 5. Well, we went ahead and did 2. This year we planned on 10, and we're asking for 4. During this process, we then adjusted our future projection. Next year, we would have asked for 11. Next year, we hope in the budget, we're asking for 6. In 24, we're asking for 15. Why? Because we moved this to the end. We dropped it down from 37 commuter buses for replacement to 27. And if the ridership doesn't return, we can make that a 0. So this is projected for next year. This is projected for 2 years out. If we don't have a ridership return, you can pretty much turn that to a 0 and that to a 0. And now you're dropping that number by an additional 21 buses. So we're really talking about 6 buses over a 5-year period for replacement. Now, expansion. Clearly, we were all excited about when buses would be purchased. We placed the order, get delivery. Why? Because it would be in advance of and have the fleet running for I-66, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that was our projected. We now know that that wasn't going to open until here, this window. But we also launched new services out of Stafford. We launched increased services along Route 1, et cetera. So what we did is we pressed older vehicles into service. And what we are asking for is the additional, so these 4 that we're asking for is for replacement. Then we have some that we need to actually expand our services with. And that's where you see the I-66 component, as well as we're running older buses on Stafford Borough services right now. By the time they come in and are pressed into service, the vehicles are running will be 20 years old. We pressed them into service when they were 17. And that was that December of 2019 when they started running. So you fast forward out if we don't have some kind of plan for that. But as you can see, we've even adjusted down our expansion, and we backloaded the purchase of the lion's share of services. So we're talking 1/3 of that is for 2 years from now. If that doesn't show up, now you're talking 15 out of 36. So this is a very conservative strategy. If we don't do this, and ridership does, if we don't do this and ridership does come back, we're in trouble in outer years because we won't have the fleet to maintain. That's why I think you described it as operationally, it's a gamble year. Capital wise, it's 2 years out. And if we don't have the operation success, there's no need to spend the money on the capital. These will turn to zeros in our fleet plan. So that's the answer for why we're still bringing a bus purchase to you, and it's to replace this modest amount of fleet right here. And then 4 of the buses are for local services, one of which is operating on Route 1, which is our highest performer in the system. And so we're running a much older bus on that as well. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the lifespan?
For our local buses, 12 years. For our commuter buses, 16. What we do is we operate them for 8 years, then we do a mid-cycle rebuild and operate them for 8 more. So we get 18 years or 16 years out of them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And for summary wise, it's between 27 and 34% of reduction. And if we think about it, what are we talking about in terms of our targeted goal is to get back to that 65, 75% in the next year or 2. That aligns fleet-wise with our ridership projections. So it fits the mold. We didn't plan it that way. We just did the math after the resolution. And we identified, yes, so we have that consistency. And as you see, 8 of the 19 are commuter choice expansion. 3 are 100% local percent. That's tied to I-66, which comes online in December. And then, of course, the local buses, 3 replacement. So the 1-for-1. And then the additional commuter choice expansion is that Route 1 bus.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I move 11-2.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Bodie, seconded by Commissioner Franklin. Any other questions?
I'll just say for discussion purposes, Dr. Schneider did mention, I used to be a regular commuter, obviously, we're in the pandemic. And we have had some challenges with buses needing maintenance, even with buses breaking down during hours of service. And you can imagine how frustrating that is for commuters or passengers actually on the bus while they break down. So I support this simply because I've seen buses on the side of the road, and we definitely need to move forward with doing more replacements. So just wanted to kind of put that out there from perspective of not only past chair, but also as an actual rider on our commuter system.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Gosh, I did it again.
We're about to give you a wig.
I'm so sorry.
It's a blonde.
I'll go with that.
Little bit of a pixie cut.
I'll get it now, I'll get it. Joyce, when you were giving the presentation, she made a comment on the capital slide with a caveat. And I don't remember her exact verbiage, but is that what she was referring to?
If the ridership doesn't come back, we won't be buying those additional buses next fiscal year for
Okay.
expansion.
And if the ridership doesn't come back between now and FY, like between now and July, or between now and when?
Probably now and a year from now,
I'm sorry?
about a year from right now, because we'll be in the formal budget preparation cycle. So our goal is not to buy buses that won't be ridden, simply put. So we have to come back to you to buy them regardless. So we're just planning for them and budgeting for them.
Well, isn't the motion to execute?
But these are for these, the ones that she was referring to are for next year. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that. I apologize.
So this is. Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate Commissioner Franklin's comments, but for me, when you get my support, you gotta get more people on the bus. So I'm gonna vote against it. Because I just think we're getting too ambitious and aggressive with the financial planning without the ridership backup.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Andrew Bailey, Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Janine Lawson,
No.
Leslie Vega,
No.
Tanisha Allen,
Yes.
Monica Gary,
Yes.
Pamela Savesky,
Yes.
Jeanette Richel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Yes.
Deborah Frazier,
Yes.
Lori Hayes,
No.
Todd Horsley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion is approved.
Thank you, Christine. And our final action item, to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Vontas to upgrade the Transit Master CAD ABL software and migrate to Azure Cloud Managed Services.
Yes, simply put, this is a very complex software upgrade. CAD AVL stands for Computer Aided Dispatch Automated Vehicle Locators. So this is our ability to track vehicles, dispatch vehicles, as well as the destination sign information, fare box information, all integrated. That feeds our part of our maintenance software, customer service department, our planning department, lots of tentacles. As you know, many things are migrating to the cloud. And so the complexity, so A, you have to upgrade, and B, the complexity of migrating to the cloud. We don't have the IT internal bandwidth. This is a extensive project. So it does exceed the spending authority. Prince William County share, because it is predominantly local and commuter-based service, they pay the lion's share of this. It's shown in the spending allocation. Otherwise, we are just kind of technology trapped for the near term. So this allows us to move forward and get that taken care of.
And if I could just say to add to that, as a first responder, to compare this to 911 emergency services, we use the CAD in the fire industry, and the ability to not only track the vehicles but actually communicate with the driver direct from an operations center to that bus, from the call center to the fire truck to the ambulance. Like, this really merges and brings what we're good at in the public service first responder world into a bus system that really probably should have been integrated, you know, a while ago, in my personal opinion. So we open for some discussion. Anybody got some questions? Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I caught myself.
We heard it.
We're gonna put like a little square drum.
Yeah, exactly. So first question is, how does this jive with our transition to the automated fare box and the app and all this stuff? Is that feed into this?
So it won't feed into the app because we intend to most likely use what is called visual validation for the commuter services. You just show your ticket, very much what we already done. Sure. So it really won't have an effect on that per se. This is more about the vehicle locator, the destination signs, they're automatic when they hit DC, and then all the internal dispatching. So it's assigning the buses, the route assignments, all the things that go in with that. It's just an expensive software package.
My last question, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. In terms of security wise, you know, we hear a lot about all these different folks going and transitioning to the cloud and how things are more integrated and automated. And that comes with that as convenience, but also it technically makes it so there's one place to hit everything, basically. How much more or less secure is this in our current system?
I can't answer that. I can go get the Wizard of Oz man behind the curtain down in his office. I'll be right back and have the answer for you.
Is this Carl?
Yes, it is Carl. Where's Carl?
While he's going for the wizard.
He's like, oh man. You didn't wear a suit for tonight.
So I'm sorry, the question?
So how more secure or less secure is this new system is from the current?
Well, it'll be a lot more secure. It's going to be using the Microsoft Azure cloud platform, which is compliant with all the security procedures that cyber attacks and everything else. Right now, it's all premise-based software here. And you know, we do our best for security, but we can't compare it to Microsoft's security platform. So it's going to be well.
Just quick follow-up, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So then most of the security is going to be offloaded onto the actual cloud administrator as opposed to our internal.
Correct. We'll be connecting via VPN to the cloud to run CAD-AVI, which you can do from anywhere. The two locations are, it's almost a necessity with our two locations now. That we'll be able to run dispatch customer service from either location or from home.
If you don't mind, I would like to remove 11 for you.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Bowie, properly seconded by Commissioner Allen. Any discussion, questions? None? All right. Seeing as please call the vote.
Victor Andrew.
Aye.
Andrew Bailey. Kenny Bodie.
Aye.
Margaret Franklin.
Aye.
Janine Lawson.
Aye.
Mr. Vega. Tanisha Allen.
Aye.
Monica Gary.
Aye.
Pamela Sadowski.
Aye.
Jeanette Mitchell.
Yes.
Matthew Kelly.
Yes.
Deborah Frazier.
Aye.
Lori Hayes.
Aye.
Todd Horsley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion is approved.
Thank you, ma'am. And moving into chair's time, what I observed today is that our executive director, Dr. Snyder, is a wealth of knowledge. And I'm gonna bring a timer in and limit him to 1 minute in a response. Because he is very informative. And I gotta get us out of here before y'all have another motion on trying to remove me from my first meeting. So moving into commissioner's time, that's all I have to say. But commissioner's time, if any, we'll start here. Well, actually, I'm gonna start with my advice. And we'll go around.
Pass.
Pass?
Pass. Have a good night.
Buenas noches.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing, but I'll do what everyone else is doing. Great job, Mr. Chairman.
Great job.
Oh, yeah.
Sayonara.
Night.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, we have motion on the floor.
Bye, everybody.
Roll call all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We're officially adjourned. Thank you.
Good job. Why did I leave that motion to me?
I'll be